during this time frame, like I said, I'm going through Master Instructor, and I meet a gentleman by the name of John Price, who's actually part of the Everyone Goes Home group. And he gets me involved. I become an advocate for the Everyone Goes Home program. I start teaching crew resource management and some other classes in this genre. And I start looking at sometimes it's a culture change for us to actually get past this. So I teach some crew resource management. We'll talk about a couple slides in here that are going directly into what I'm going to talk about today. But this all started from the Life Safety Initiatives Summit back in 2004. A group of training officers, chiefs, and everybody got together, and their whole goal was to reduce line of duty deaths by 50% over 5 years. And they started looking at what are we doing wrong, like we're talking about today. And from that born was the Everyone Goes Home program and the 16 life safety initiatives. Number one being define and advocate the need for a cultural change. So let's look at our culture.
Indian 41I, 41 Battalion 4, House Fire, 420 East Laurel, 420 East Laurel, between Cannon and Sycamore, Red 1.
Well, where's the red one?
I don't know, Cap. I think he's in a pooper. There he is, Cap.
So this is a concept that I actually came up with in the Master Instructor series as I'm talking about fallen firefighters and the Everyone Goes Home program with John Price. And my brain is being reformed to think about what we're really doing. And we sketched this out. You know, we sketched this out in the Master Instructor program. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to literally do this. So several years later, 6 years later, I'm actually discussing this concept with a Training Instructor 1C class, and they said, let's do it. Let's make the video. And they pitched in, and we did the video up along with my buddy Chad, that's the Grim Reaper in here. But the Grim Reaper is there all the time. How can we avoid it? All right. So the Everyone Goes Home program, again, some of these projects you've probably heard about. Safety through leadership, that's actually part of this program. Crew resource management. The National Seatbelt Pledge, like we discussed earlier, seatbelts. It's amazing to me that we could literally be not wearing seatbelts today. That's just a simple thing as trying to get everybody in the United States to sign a thing that says, I will wear my seatbelt. And as much as you would think that is an easy feat, an easy task, 80% of the fire departments in the United States or something like that have not signed the seatbelt pledge. They refuse in some form or fashion, okay? So firefighter safety stand-downs once per year, focusing a week on just safety, nutrition, exercise, safety, no inspections, I guess, yay. But certain things that you get to do there. Courage to be safe, what we lack, leadership, accountability, culture, knowledge. All of these things, they continue to try to push training out to reduce those line of duty deaths, okay? So crew resource management, again, one of the classes that I've taught in there, talking about a way to get away from that culture, and it gives us a way to speak up and a way to listen. It doesn't mean it's a democracy, doesn't mean it undermines the company officer's input or the authority of that, but you want to be able to make sure that you have an enhanced communication model. So again, this is a small sliver of it, but cockpit resource management was the beginning of this in the aviation industry, and it grew into crew resource management when they involved the other flight personnel. But they recognized early on in the aviation industry when they were crashing planes pretty frequently in the 1980s that it wasn't the plane falling apart, it was a problem with the people flying the plane where they were crashing these things. Now, the airlines industry, just like the fire service, there's a lot of it that goes on where the fire chiefs and the captains make the decisions. They're not allowed to question orders up until the point where they crash planes.
Robbie, check your final position. I'm going to take her down.
Wait a few more minutes, Skipper.
Do as I say.
It looks like...
Do as I say.
Give me a few more minutes.
I've already waited too long. Here we go.
No, we don't. Get a hold of yourself, you yellow.
Okay, now again, I don't have time to give you a full crew resource management class today, but I can tell you the punchline is not go back and John Wayne your chief when he gives you an order. That's not what I'm telling you. But there is certain things to actually being able to speak up with this, all right? So this really came to light when cockpit resource management was affected. It was this flight right here, Flight 173 on final approach to Portland, actually, in 1978. Very experienced cockpit crew of 3 with 8 flight attendants and 181 passengers on board. During the time frame on the final approach, they noticed that the nose gear light did not illuminate, and they started running through the checklist, putting the gear up, taking it back down, a couple of other things as far as checking hydraulics. And the pilot asked for additional flight time to correct the problem. And during this troubleshooting, the captain is warned a couple of times that they're running low on fuel by the flight engineer. During this time frame, the captain either ignores the warning or doesn't comprehend how low on fuel they really are. And obviously what goes up must come down. They run out of fuel and kill a couple people and injure 23. The only thing that really kept this plane from catching fire is there was no fuel. So that was probably the good thing in there, all right? Post-accident analysis actually shows that the landing gear was down and in place the entire time. It was literally a light bulb that cost about $4 that actually crashed this plane. So they looked at how can we actually do this better. Now, if you actually look at the checklist on this, now they actually do the Top Gun thing. They actually buzz the tower, and the tower verifies if the landing gear's in place or not, something they didn't have before. So they're looking at what are the other resources we have to, again, make this a safer thing. Since they've actually implemented crew resource management in the aviation industry, the average of 20 air crashes per year in the U.S. has gone to about 1 to 2. It's actually kind of increasing lately because even the aviation industry is now becoming complacent against crew resource management. So there's basically 5 factors that we look at: communication, situational awareness, decision-making, teamwork, and then the barriers that keep all of those from happening. So small little snippet of the crew resource management program, but obviously if we continue down this path, we're gonna literally have another 1,000 fatalities and 100,000 injuries in the next 10 years. So again, how do we change it? Going through that question again, what can I do personally? I came up with slab savers. I was doing a lot of tactics and strategy training, and this is all it is, right? It's a basic acronym. We've done RESEAL for a lot of years, but savers was always there. I taught savers for a long time: search, attack, ventilation, exposures or extension, RIC, and salvage. But the slab wasn't there before. The slab didn't come to me until we go, well, where's the strategy part of this? This is the tactics. Where's the strategy? Unfortunately, when you start calling this class slab savers and I start going around the country, people are just taking the class just because, well, the name kind of pissed me off. I want to see what you're going to say. So with that, sometimes the buildings are a slab. So this course is actually designed to get them to do some risk management process in this, because the slide carousels that we're all basing our firefighting on, a lot of us don't have the slide carousels that we had as some of the previous mentors that we had, because we're just not getting fires anymore. It's great if you have this slide carousel to say, I know how to attack this fire because I've been on this fire before. But if all you got is this or that or that, you don't have enough slide carousels to make good tactical decisions because you don't have them, okay? So we need to increase the slide carousels, and sometimes that's through digital simulation or tabletop stuff or whatever, but we're looking at a way to actually do that. In the Slab Savers course, again, sometimes this goes against everything we want to hear. We're here to save lives and property, lives being this big, property being this big, right? We've talked about that before, but we want to do that. However, over the last couple of years, there's a couple of other terms that have come up, new terms that are challenging our risk assessment, such as risk versus gain profile, dynamic risk assessment by Mike Alder, rules of engagement by the International Association of Fire Chiefs, survivability profile, transitional fire attack from UL and NIST. Okay, all these things actually talk about, yeah, sometimes you don't have to endanger your crew's lives. You need to actually do a risk assessment. So if we're looking at our risk, we are actually putting ourselves in a risk, and we have to, again, calculate that out. A situation involving exposure to danger. You as an incident commander are exposing your crews to danger. That's the first step in this, understanding that. Number 2, there could be harm or loss if you actually do that. And sometimes you are risking it all or gambling sometimes with your crew's lives, unfortunately, on what you're saving. Now, growing up in the fire service, I always heard the term calculated risk. We take calculated risks. So there's a drill that I do with a brand new firefighter. I usually let them get 6 months into it. They're learning how to throw ladders and pull hose. And we go to an abandoned house in my city, which there's not too many in the city of Gracious Living in Upland. But we go to an abandoned house and I say, all right, rescue drill. Somebody's trapped inside the structure. Hose line to the door, charged, ready to go, mask on in 2 minutes, okay? They're so focused on the time, they're so focused on whatever, and amazingly, these are new probationary firefighters, so the first thing my firefighter steps off the rig, goes to the engineer, sir, I'll be pulling the rear 200-foot pre-connect. And I go, if we go to a fire and you do that, I'll have to kill you. We don't do that, all right? So he pulls the line, stretches it to the door, gets it charged, flakes it out, everything's great, has his mask on, and I think it was like 2 minutes and 14 seconds. By the time I grabbed tools, a tick, did a half-ass 360 and get back to him, we're ready to make entry, it was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. As soon as that's done, I grab that firefighter, drag him back around the other side of the fire engine, and I say something simple as, what color was the house? How many stories was it? He doesn't know because the calculated risk portion isn't there. He's not looking at that. He's looking at, I got 2 minutes to get to the door, the captain's gonna kick my shit in. So we have to look at the consequences. Sometimes we have to say, this is a slab, we're not gonna save it. Okay? Now, we can't eliminate risk from the fire service altogether. I'm saying we want to try to tone it down a little bit. There's definitely buildings we're going into we should not be going into. That's the biggest thing about this. How many of you remember this Fire Engineering magazine issue that came out, the white cover? Okay? So this was actually 2 decades ago. They come up with a white cover. All these people are challenging Fire Engineering magazine. They're basically saying every cover you put on there, guys aren't wearing their masks or their gloves, and it's an unsafe fire scene. And he says, if all you guys want to see is safe fire scenes on the front of our magazines, this is what you get, okay? There is no safe fire scene. There's risk associated, but the stuff that they were talking about, can we fix that? Not wearing gloves, not wearing masks on the roof. Yeah, we could fix that. But there's no such thing as a safe fire scene. It's an emergency. That's why they call it emergency. Okay? So doing a risk versus gain profile, again, a lot of us have heard these new terms. Risk a lot to save a lot. We'll risk a little to save a little. We'll risk nothing to save nothing. Now, whether you've heard this or not, the biggest thing is the challenge is, what does it actually mean to you? That means sometimes you don't go into some burning structures. And until you get that part right, this doesn't mean anything. Until you say, you know what, there's nothing in here to save, there's no people we've already verified, sometimes we don't go in. But it's a calculated risk, okay? Rules of engagement by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Again, some of you have probably seen these posters maybe on your bathroom stall walls. I know that's where it is at my fire station. But we look at the rules of engagement for firefighter survival. I'm going to talk about a few. Size up your tactical area of operation. Determine the occupant survivability profile. Do not risk your life or lives for property that cannot be saved. Extend limited risk to savable property, okay? So those are the first 4 in the firefighter, and the incident commander, guess what? A lot of those are repeated. Rapidly conduct a 360, determine occupant survivability profile, conduct a risk assessment, do not risk firefighters' lives for property that cannot be saved. So some of these buildings are just going to be slabs, they're going to be parking lots later on, and you need to implement that somewhere. Tactics are great, strategy is where it starts, okay? So I think we've covered that here. I'll blow through that. And that's where the slab comes in. I'm looking at safety profile, life profile, air track, and building, and constantly monitoring that. Some buildings, we just don't go in like this one, all right? And some of us have saved slabs, okay? Some of us have risked our lives. Some of us have become injured. And when it's all said and done, they make it a parking lot. The bulldozer comes down, okay? So you got to look at what we're doing out there. If we're talking about keeping ourselves safe, the lives and property that we're trying to save, we got to look at that, how much risk we're actually putting into it. All right, so this slab actually determines what your strategy is, offensive, defensive, or marginal. This picture I always use because sometimes some of the houses we're going into now, I call them a thrift store full of thrift, or other house full of whatever. But literally, sometimes these places just become parking lots. And this actually gets directed right into your 360, and you give each one of those a red light, yellow light, green light. Safety profile, red light, yellow light, green light. Life profile, air track, building, and it's very easy model to use with digital simulations or dash cam videos or helmet cam videos. Okay. So putting the question back to you guys, again, if there was one thing that you could do to make the fire service safer, let's start with the basics that they talked about on that U.S. Fire Administration slide. Health and wellness, work out with your crews, have some type of wellness program in your fire department. Hopefully a lot of us are jumping on the bandwagon with that, and that's not a problem anymore. Risk versus gain, again, doing better assessments on some of the stuff we're doing out there. But again, wear your seatbelt. Slow down. If you're the captain, tell the engineer to slow down. Whoever it is that's driving too fast. Wear your PPE. That one should be pretty simple. Don't become complacent. That one's a little harder. Train as if your life depends on it, and speak up if you see something unsafe. Take it a step further. Use case studies as much as possible, whether it's this sawtooth entrapment, whether it's whatever you've had. The hard part about this is, and I've dealt with this, trying to get to that effective learning model. You bring up case studies, and the first two questions, they say, was it a volunteer fire department? Was it in this state? That's usually what they do, right? You need to look at how we actually do case study review, bring up certain lessons learned, and how it can actually come home to their department, how this could happen here, okay? Because it can happen here. This is my fire department, over a decade now. Basic traffic collision on the 10 freeway, okay? The engineer is actually put in a medically induced coma while a piece of his skull is taken out because of the brain swelling. He's actually in a coma for more than several months. Motorcycle car accident on the other side of the freeway, and they were jumping the center divide. Certain things that have changed our culture. We don't do that anymore, okay? But unfortunately, this stuff had to occur for us to change that culture, okay? So this was quite a while ago in my department. My previous fire department, this is a nice little picture of part of this incident. We're on a basic traffic collision with a car that sheared a power pole and a hydrant. The captain opposite me on the other unit actually goes around to get the the pole number off the electrical pole to radio it into the dispatch center. And during that time frame, he fell into the water of the sheared hydrant in the sinkhole. And this thing had to be good 20 feet by 30 feet wide. And luckily, the power pole was going right across the middle of this, and he was able to grab onto it. He was in full turnout gear, and for literally several days, he was spitting up sediment out of his lungs. Okay, could have died that day. He got lucky. My next one, this actually occurred a couple years ago. This is our old animal shelter, or the dog pound they referred to it as. Inside this building, just like these concrete block walls, there was 5-foot pony walls every so many feet to hold the dogs inside the animal shelter. The crews are in there doing some USAR training because we built a new animal shelter. They're using some USAR tools. They're doing some pretty good training with a rebar cutter and a demolition hammer. Well, one of those falls, because we didn't know this at the time, the walls did not have any rebar or anchoring going to the concrete slab. One of the walls falls. And it falls to the next wall and the next and the next, and it dominoes across to a crew on the other side, a firefighter and captain doing some other training on the other side. One of the firefighters tries to stop the wall. It probably weighs like 8,000 or something pounds. Breaks his thumb. Luckily, there was another captain that grabbed him and pulled him out of the way. Another captain was actually in the area. The wall hits him in the abdomen, takes him to the ground, crushes everything from his pelvic bone down. And we retired him medically. And this is where we're at. So for us to talk about the whole concept of everyone goes home, I preach it every single day. With the Everyone Goes Home program, I preach that, but unfortunately the Everyone Goes Home program doesn't work until it hits home. Until you actually get that people get injured and people get killed and you start looking at that in a different perspective, we might end up having something go on at our department or have the Grim Reaper show up at our doorstep. Okay, this is a Sawtooth 1 year later, the crew up there. Again, notice there's another person that's not there from my crew. But this is Sawtooth 1 year later, and we're looking at, hey, eventually the slab grows back apparently. Okay. That's it for my presentation. Thank you for your time.